Howdy, my name is Gabriella Reiner, and I'm a student at Texas A&M, and I will be discussing prompt 2 for this CRE assignment, which is, do you agree or disagree that we should limit the voting age? I personally disagree about limiting the voting age. I think we should let it be lower. And my positionality for this is that I am 19, about to turn 20, and so this past election for governor was the first time that I could vote. I missed the 2020 presidential election by only a few months, which arguably was one of the most important elections in our recent history. I missed it because I was born a couple months after the date of acceptance. Which brings me into my argument, and that is no taxation without representation. I personally started working at 17 years old, but I know people that started working at 14 years old. The government taxed me and them the same, but we were not privy to the right to vote for elected officials whenever we had money being taken from us from our jobs. My concept with that was, why was I, who was 17, a couple months behind the date, who was working, not able to vote on an important election when somebody who did make the cutoff just because they were born a couple months before me, who was not working, who was not contributing to the economy, why were they able to vote over me, someone who was contributing to the economy? So in lecture 19 by Dr. Hernandez, we made the example that all the same excuses being made today on why younger people can't vote have been made in the past with women and people of color. We need to stop that cycle because those reasons simply aren't true. The reasons, oh, women are just going to vote like how their husbands vote. Some people make the argument that kids are going to vote how their parents vote. That's not true. That's not always the case. So we need to give those who work, 14, 15, 16, 17-year-olds, we need to give those people the opportunity to have a voice. We need to stop treating them like children, because if we think they're responsible enough to drive a motor vehicle or to work a job, then they should be responsible enough to vote for elected officials. And in lecture 18, we discuss stigma and group identity. In regards to this, we have seen a lot of older people characterize our generation as being lazy, which is simply not true. Which brings me into lecture 18, the idea of not comparing suffering was brought up. I find that younger generations and older generations get caught up in this battle of who worked the hardest and who suffered more. We need to stop this narrative if we are going to get anywhere with each other. We need to be able to have a civil conversation without comparing battles and battles. We need to be able to have a civil conversation. Which brings me into what we discussed all the way back in lecture 2. We discussed the concept of framing, which is how we see the world based on our ideals, core beliefs, and experiences. I feel if both older and younger generations took the time to understand the framing of the other, then there would be less fear due to ignorance about younger people voting. I feel like older generations a lot of the times just don't understand where younger generations are coming, and vice versa. So if we are able to take away the barriers, take away the hostilities between both generations, then we will be better able to understand where each generation is coming from. And that creates a better conversation. Which brings me into, why do younger generations not vote? So an article I found by the New York Times addressed this very topic and stated, voting is a habit formed over time, and one possible reason young people do it less frequently is that they have had fewer opportunities to form and reinforce the habit. So older generations have had this habit since they were able to vote. They vote every year. For some reason, our generation, it could be because of our parents or some other factors, the habit of voting has not been instilled in us as much as it was in the older generations, which we're not going to go out and do something unless a habit maintains and is reinforced. So one aspect of this that I think younger generations, why they don't vote, is we also don't feel like the US government adequately represents us in regards to age. And this is seen in course media. Why is the US government so old? The vast majority of our US government is well over 40, 50, 60 years old. And as younger generations, it can be discouraging because they are just not on the same wavelength as us. They don't think the same way as us. Their problems that they consider to be more important and valuable aren't the same as ours. Which is also why I think it's so important for younger people to be able to vote, because since they are locked out for the majority of their young lives, there really is no representation for the younger generation, the school age generation. And so here's some institutional things and strategies that we can employ to increase civic engagement and voting numbers among young voters. So to start off with something mentioned in lecture 10, and this is of course if the voting age is extended downward, we can have schools take the time every time there's an election to host mock voting for those that aren't able to vote yet. That can start creating the habit of going out and voting. And for those that are old enough to vote, time can be taken out of the day to go take a class to go vote, as we mentioned in class. And along with that, there needs to be a better education on things such as taxes, the role of government, other different roles, etc., that we have a severe lacking of currently in education, which is another way an institution can help reinforce younger voting ages. And then a big thing with my generation especially is the lack of interpersonal motivation to go vote. And I do believe this is magnified by media corporations. So this is seen especially in course media. When local news dies, so does our democracy, where big corporations are being downsized and corrupted by millionaires to swing the narrative one way or the other, which is further addressed in course media, the slippery slope of the oligarchy media model. So I feel like a lot of our generation just doesn't trust the media anymore. The media is not how it once was. I think older voters are more trusting that the media has maintained the same and has maintained the same morals that it has always had. But at this point in time, most major media corporations have been bought out by millionaires, and they will swing everyday news one way or the other, politically, through religion, any way they deem fit that will benefit them in the long run, which isn't good news. We need to have news that is fair, news that is accurate, and news that isn't focused on the oversaturation of politics. Additionally, I think our generation especially has become numb to all the tragedies of the world due to the oversaturation of it in media. And this is seen in the course media. Is media altering our perception of crime? Our generation has lived through many tragedies in our lifetime. We have had more mass shootings than I think any generation has ever witnessed before. And we have become numb to that sort of thing. A lot of us were born in the aftermath of 9/11. We were growing up in the recession. A lot of us saw our parents lose their jobs. And finally, we were in our most formative years in high school going through a global pandemic, which affected the whole world, but I feel like it really affected the developmental age and status of those going through high school, middle school, elementary school. And so I think for interpersonal responsibility, we should vet the media that we consume as well as know our limits to the negativity in the media. I feel like we often become discouraged, so we don't bother trying to change anything by voting. Young people have more insight into the modern US than anyone. We more than anyone are affected by the laws the people make. We need to take back our future. We as young people, we have more insight into technology and how things work. And I think through social media, we have connected more as a generation than the other generations previously. But I think with that is the double-edged sword that we have consumed more negativity than any other generation before us. So I think it's really important to not become discouraged and bogged down by the tragedies that we see in the media because of its oversaturation. So that way we still maintain hope. And through that hope, we still maintain the drive to go vote, which I think is very important for our generation. And I also think that is why the voting ages should be lowered. Thank you for listening to me today. Have a good one.